This PowerPoint is about how to answer A-level questions. And so what I'm going to be looking at is really starting off by looking at the layout of the paper, looking at the mark scheme and how it is marked. Now, this is not my viewpoint. I want to make it really clear. Earlier this year, I went on a training course, online training course, and it was the chief examiner who was training us on how to mark these A-level papers. So the information I'm giving you is the information that the chief examiner gave me, and going to be going through some exemplar answers which students have written, and these are real responses in a live exam, and we'll be sort of going through these are the marks that these students got. Okay, so first of all, really to remind you, I don't know if you're going to hear this, but the A-level exam consists of 2 papers, each lasting 3 hours. So the first paper, epistemology and moral philosophy, and the second paper, metaphysics of God and metaphysics of the mind. Now, at the moment, we haven't done paper 2. We've only done paper 1, but it is the same mark scheme. It's the same pattern for both papers in terms of how it's going to be marked. Now, AO1. Is assessment objective 1, and that's concerned with your knowledge, explanation and analysis, making sure you're using keywords and an accurate description explanation of what these concepts are. AO2 is when you're taking that knowledge and those analysis and you are evaluating the work. Now, as you can see, questions, there's 1 3-mark question, 2 5-mark questions, excuse me, 1 12-mark question, and all of those marks are going to be AO1. So it's about you demonstrating your knowledge and being able to explain it, give examples, and show your analysis. The 25-mark question. Now, only 5 marks are for assessment objective 1. 20 marks is for assessment objective 2. So for the vast majority, these are half the marks. Now, the vast majority for this question is going to be you evaluating the analysis that you've already put in place. There's only 5 marks for AO1. Okay, so we have to bear that in mind when we're looking at the mark scheme, and that's really, really important, but we'll come to that later on. So let's look at the question 1, which is a 3-mark question, and what I've got there on the top right is the mark scheme, and as you can see, marks 3, 2, 1, 0. 3, a full and correct answer given precisely with little or no redundancy. 2 marks, substantive content, the answer is correct, but maybe some redundancy or minor imprecision. 1 relevant but fragmented points. So here you have got 3 students. Like I said, these are all live from live papers. Now, I want you to be thinking, what marks would you give for each student? So I'm going to read them out. I want you to look at the mark scheme. And as I'm reading out, start thinking about what mark will you give each of those questions, each of those answers. So student A, this is for what is philosophical skepticism. It is a standard level of doubt one can expect from a philosopher considering something. Student B, philosophical skepticism claims that there are reasons to doubt knowledge claims about the existence of an external world, and these really need to be tested by philosophical argument before we can be confident. C, philosophical skepticism sometimes involves questioning whether knowledge of the world is possible at all, as all the usual standards of justification we use are unconvincing. For example, whether it is possible to know that other minds exist, or whether the future will resemble the past, the problem of induction. Just want you to think about it just for a few seconds. I'll just be quiet for a few seconds. What you think, what marks would you give for A, B, and C? Okay, so student A, really no marks. There's nothing there. It's just saying level of doubt, but you're going to get nothing. Student B, 2 marks. Now, so that means it's substantively correct, but it's too narrow. When you look at it, philosophical skepticism claims, nothing new there. There are reasons to doubt knowledge claims about the existence of an external world, so you're probably going to get a mark for that. These really need to be tested by philosophical. There's another mark there. C is going to be full marks. There's at least three sentences there, three ideas there, which can be, and it's correct, it's full. Skepticism is sometimes involves questioning whether knowledge of the world is possible at all. Mark, usual standards of justification we use, unconvincing. As for example, is it possible to know other minds exist, or whether? So, and they're given examples there. So it is 3 marks. So the mark scheme for questions 2 and 3. Both of these are 5-mark questions. Now I can't get the mark scheme up there at the same time as the answer, so you might have to go backwards and forwards a little bit. So marks 5, a full, clear, precise explanation. Student makes logical links between precisely identified points, no redundancy. Let's look at 3 marks. The substantive content of the explanation is present. There is an attempt at logical linking, but the explanation not full and or precise. 2, 1 or 2 relevant points made, but not precisely logical and clear. So I'm going to read this out. Again, I want you to be sort of thinking about, as I'm reading them out, what marks would you give? Question is, explain one way in which a direct realist could respond to the argument from illusion. Direct realism claims I directly perceive the world and its properties, and therefore the world I see is the world that there is. From this, we can infer that the world I perceive must be a mind-independent physical world, because the objects themselves hold their properties, and if there were no physical objects, then there would be no properties to hold. An issue with this point of view is that it causes problems with illusions, as they would have to be directly true and real, e.g. pink elephants. Austin argued that it is possible to know when illusions are deceiving us, as it is possible to scientifically explain away these illusions, and so the issue of illusions is solved. E. Illusions and hallucinations can just be distortions of the world as we see it. It can be argued that it is perceptual language that is to blame for our misunderstanding of the world. Perceptual language is the words we use to describe qualities of an object. The tree is green, the cat smells like fish, that fish tastes like chicken. These descriptions do not relate to actual physical properties of the world, but to concepts our minds have connected to them. If we were to use scientific language to describe our sense data, we will be describing something real, not something subjective. However, philosophers still argue that there is not enough proof of the external world, because we cannot fully experience the external world due to the fact that we can only view it through our subjective perceiving minds. And then the last one. Student F. Direct realism states that we perceive physical objects and the properties that they have without mediation, which is contrary to indirect realism, which argues that what we perceive directly is sense data. The problem of illusions for direct realism is that if I put a straight stick in water, then the stick appears bent, and if direct realism is true, then the stick must be bent, because that is what I am seeing. But we know that this stick is not bent. Philosophical direct realism can explain these optical illusions by saying that a natural physical process is taking place here, which can be understood in natural scientific terms. The stick in the water appears to be bent because of the process of refraction. The apparent bentness of the stick is just a relational property between subject and object, not a property of the object itself. So the theory can still stand regardless of illusions. I know there might be some spelling mistakes there, but really that is just how it was written in the exam. So again, think back, look at the mark scheme, think back in terms of what sort of marks would you give for these questions. So that's the mark scheme. Student D. Now you might be surprised, might not. They've written quite a bit. 2 marks. So we look at the 2 marks there. 1 or 2 relevant points made, but not precisely. The logic is unclear. So it's not that what they've said is wrong. It's just that they're not making links. They do talk about illusions. They go e.g. pink elephants. That sounds more like a hallucination rather than an illusion. I don't know why they're throwing pink elephants in there. And while it's true, and it causes problems with illusions that would have to be directly true and real, they've not really explained the problem with illusions and the argument that illusion brings to the debate. So they only get 2 marks. Student E, only 1 mark. They don't really talk about direct realism that much. They don't really talk about illusion. Remember, look at the question. Explain one way in which a direct realist could respond to the argument from illusion. Now, they talk about perceptual language an awful lot, but I can't really see much there about illusions. They also start off the answer, by saying illusions and hallucinations. The question is purely about illusion. The examiners are really picky on this. If you lump illusions and hallucinations together, they will not be happy with that. The question is asking about illusion, stick to illusion. So they haven't really talked about illusion. So there is some stuff there that you'd be able to give some marks for, okay? Like proof of the external world and fully experience the external world, I suppose, but it's only 1 mark out of 5. Now that student will probably leave thinking, I've written loads, I've written some good stuff, but they've only got 1 mark out of 5 because they haven't actually answered the question. And then the last one, student F, 5 marks. This is an excellent answer. Okay, they tell me what direct realism is. They're really clear with the problem of illusion. Look at the problem of illusions for direct realism is that if I put a straight stick in water, then the stick appears bent. And if direct realism is true, then the stick must be bent, because that's what I'm seeing. Compare that to student D. An issue with this point of view is that it causes problems of illusions, as they would have to be directly true and real, e.g. pink elephants. You can see the difference between explanation of the problem of illusion. It's so much better with student F. They've explained what it is really clearly. I don't understand what pink elephants is about in student D, but student F, I get it with this bent stick. Don't try and come up with your own examples. There are good examples in the textbook. Stick to those. The examiner will know those examples. Don't try and be clever in an exam, okay? You sort of think, just this one here, the stick being bent in the water, is just a classic example. Use it. And then it's got the philosophical, so it tells me what direct realism is. It tells me what the problem of illusions, for direct realism is. And then it tells me direct realism's response to the argument from illusion. Because don't forget, that's what the question's asking for. Explain one way in which a direct realist could respond to the argument from illusion, not what is the argument from illusion. It's how the direct realist responds to the argument. So you need to tell me what a direct realist is, you need to tell me what illusion is, you need to tell me how they respond. That's why they've got 5 marks. Okay, so mark scheme for question 4. 12-mark question. Marks 10 to 12, answer and precise, fully integrated logical form. Content is correct. Points are made clearly, precisely. Philosophical language used throughout. Okay, again, clearly, these are going to be long answers. So I'm going to read it out. I want you to be thinking, what mark would you give it again? Look at marks 4 and 6. The answer is clear, set out in coherent form. Logical causal links identified. The content into the answer is largely correct. Most points are made clearly. Relevance is not always sustained. There is some redundancy. So a student who's written an answer that's getting 4 to 6 will be thinking, I really a good answer here. Like it says, the content is largely correct. Points are made clearly. But what they won't be doing is evaluating it. It's that thread of the argument that the examiner is looking for throughout the answer. Not just a paragraph that's correct, a separate paragraph that's correct. They want to see the links, the evaluation, the argument sustained throughout the answer. So, question 4, outline moral realism and explain how Mackie's argument from queerness opposes this view. Moral realism is the cognitivist view that moral statements articulate beliefs about a mind-independent reality. They can be verified, falsified, so it can be proved true or false. It includes moral naturalism, which says that moral facts are natural facts and can be verified by experience of the natural world. It also includes moral non-naturalism, which says moral facts are not natural facts and instead can be discovered through intuition. Mackie's argument for queerness comes from his error theory, which is a cognitivist anti-moral realist theory, which says when we make moral statements, we are articulating beliefs about a mind-independent reality, but this mind-independent reality does not exist, so all moral assertions are false. The argument for queerness says if moral facts existed, they would be different from everything else in the world, queer. Metaphysical queerness says that if moral facts existed, they would be part of the fabric of the universe, but it would be odd for the wrongness of abortions to be part of the fabric of the universe. Moral facts would motivate us, so would have persuadedness inbuilt, meaning they would be queer from everything else in the world. Epistemological queerness says that if immoral facts existed, then how would we know them? They cannot be discovered through experiences or intuition, and they are not self-evident. They have no way of making themselves known, so they are queer from the rest of the universe. Now, there's some spelling mistakes in there and grammatical mistakes. It is how it is written. You don't forget, don't worry too much about it. So long as the meaning comes across, you are in an exam. And when you're writing quickly, you know, sometimes spellings go out of the way. But we understand what this person is trying to say. Now, they got 9 out of 12. Clear response, which addresses both parts of the question. Could be more precise in moral realism and more detailed in the epistemological dimension. Okay, both parts of the question. Outline moral realism as one part. Explain how Mackie's argument for queerness opposes this view. That's the other part of the question. So, yes, they have done that. They've told me what moral realism is. They've explained queerness. The examiner felt they could have been more precise, though, and more detailed in epistemological dimension. Epistemological queerness only comes in the last 2.5 lines. So, on the whole, though, that is a good answer. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Okay, this is still question 4, 12 marker, but very different in length. But don't let that fool you. Moral realism is the view that morality exists objectively. By this, I mean that it exists mind independently. Either moral facts are natural facts or they are non-natural facts, depending on whether one is an ethical naturalist or an ethical non-naturalist. The importance is that they exist objectively, meaning that moral propositions are capable of either being true or false. Moral realism is a cognitivist view, meaning that moral language is used to attempt to describe the world and that moral language has a mind to world direction of fit. This means that our minds change on the world and objective facts about it rather than the world changing depending on our mind. Now, Mackie offers 2 arguments on queerness to respond to moral realism. The first is from epistemological queerness, and a formal version of the argument would run as follows. P1, in order to know moral facts, I must be able to know what goodness is. P2, I cannot know goodness in any of the normal ways in which I know objective facts, such as empirical observation or introspection. Conclusion, therefore, I must have some special epistemological faculty which only gives me knowledge of moral facts. Premise 3, this is queer, strange. Conclusion, therefore, it is unlikely to be true and unlikely to be the case that moral realism is true and that objective mind independent morality exists. In his argument from queerness, Mackie argued that it is unclear how we know moral facts. We do not gain knowledge of moral facts in the same way that we gain knowledge of other facts. This leaves 2 possibilities. Either moral facts do not exist, or we have some special faculty of gaining knowledge of moral facts, which is only used for moral facts. The former is much more plausible. Therefore, for Mackie, moral realism is false. Mackie's second argument for queerness is from metaphysical queerness. He begins by identifying that morality motivates us. Moral facts have a certain to-be-persuadedness quality about them, in that they motivate us to act. No other facts, Mackie argues, motivate us in this way. Facts do not motivate us in the end of themselves. Desires, motivators, and our actions are a result of these and how they relate to specific natural facts. For example, the fact that chair is leather does not motivate me in and of itself to buy it. I am only motivated to buy it if I desire leather chairs. So moral facts are proposed to have this intrinsic quality of to be persuadedness which no other fact possesses. Therefore, again, we are left with two options. Either moral facts do not exist, or they are unlike any other fact. The former is a lot more plausible, therefore moral realism is incorrect. Now, the spellings have not detracted from the meaning of the answer. Have they answered the two-part? They've explained what moral realism is. Yes, they have. Have they argued the two arguments from queerness? Yes, they have. They've done it in a formal epistemological queerness. You compare that epistemological queerness response to the other one. Whoops, didn't mean to get epistemological queerness, just 2.5 lines there. Epistemological queerness is a lot more, okay, and done in a formal way, and it is well argued. Then Mackey's second argument for queerness, the metaphysical queerness, that has also been argued very, very well. So it'll be no surprise that this person got full marks for that particular answer. Okay, and I think what's main points here answer the question. I know it seems outline moral realism. Okay, so in your answer, outline moral realism. What is it? Because you cannot use Mackey's argument from queerness to oppose the view if you don't know what the view is he's opposing. So make sure you look at the question, you understand what the question is asking you to do. Outline moral realism. So the first paragraph, that is what I'm going to do. And the second student does this incredibly well. Talks about moral naturalism and moral non-naturalism, the difference between them, but what they agree on a mind-independent, objective moral reality. And from there on, they go into Mackey's argument from queerness, epistemological and metaphysical. Full marks. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, so now got a problem here in terms of on the PowerPoint. There's the mark scheme for the 25-mark question. The questions are so long, I want to be able to get it on the slide on the PowerPoint. So what I have done, I have uploaded the student responses to the teams. They're the two questions, okay? Question 5, how successful is the tripartite definition of knowledge? Now, there are two answers, responses to that, two different student responses to that. Another question 5 on the moral philosophy side, how convincing is the Aristotelian virtue ethics? Okay, so what I suggest you do is, if I go back to the mark scheme, is that you pause the video now. Okay, you pause the video when I'm going to tell you to. You read those answers, you look at the mark scheme, and you decide where you are going to give the marks. Now, the first thing that the examiner would do is decide which band does this essay go into. Is it, they don't give it a straight mark. They'll go, oh, is it 11 to 15? Is it band 4? In which case, is it a good band 4, or does it just scrape into band 4? Okay, or is it band 5, 16 to 20? Again, does it just scrape into there, or is it straddling between band 5 and band 4? Once you've decided which band it is in, then you can decide whether it is in there in a strong form or whether it just scrapes in. Okay, so I will leave there. What I suggest you do, you pause it, and then you can switch it back on, press play once you've read the answers, and I'll tell you what marks they got. Okay, so hopefully you've read the answers, and so let's look at the different marks these students got. So student L, they got 19 out of 25. So a very, very good answer. Argues a sustained intent against the JTB theory. The knowledge and understanding is relevant, often detailed, and mostly correct. Relevant philosophical language is used clearly and correctly. The student makes virtue epistemology the preferred position over JTB from the outset, but the explanation and analysis of this key position is not as precise as the other positions, and it is not robustly defended against objections. So essentially what this student has done, and let's not mess about here, this is a very good essay. But the reason why they didn't get 25 out of 25 was because their explanation analysis of virtue epistemology isn't as precise as it should have been, and basically it is not robustly defended against the objections. Okay, and that's a very common mistake that students make. Essentially, you have your preference in terms of what you think is the strongest argument, when that's great. They want you to nail your colours to the mast. And as you explain that as precisely as you can, there are always going to be objections against your preferred argument. You've got to acknowledge what those objections are, but then you really got to defend your preferred argument, your preferred viewpoint as you go through this. Okay, so 19. Student M, 14. Clear answer in the form of an argument. Understanding lacks detail and position, e.g. in the Gettier example. The evaluative points made are not very well integrated at the end, and the favoured position is not well defended. Relevant philosophical language is used. Okay, so make sure your evaluation is integrated into the essay. What the examiner doesn't want to see is you write a paragraph and then the last line or two is an evaluated point. They want to see the evaluation as the main thread throughout the essay. Don't forget, 20 marks out of 25 are for evaluation. So, question 5, how convincing is Aristotelian virtue ethics? 22, brilliant essay. Argues with sustained intent, detailed understanding, the position is robustly defended. There was obviously space for a conclusion that made critical judgments about the relative weight of arguments. That's an interesting point. Not just giving different arguments, but which are the strongest arguments and the weakest arguments. But top band qualities are manifest throughout this essay at the level of knowledge, understanding, evaluation, and analysis. Throughout the essay, there is a sustained argument. This person has nailed their colours to the mast. They sustained the argument. They've explained why that's a strong view. They've robustly defended that view from other arguments which are saying Aristotelian virtue ethics isn't that good, and that's why they come out with 22 marks. Okay, now this has been a long video. It's nearly half an hour, so I won't be surprised really if not everybody gets to this point. What I suggest you do is go through this again, but just look at the 3-mark question and stop the video there and see why those students got those marks. And then maybe in the you haven't got that many 3-mark questions, I'll try and find some questions for you to be able to answer. There's not a lot on the internet, but then start practicing writing out 3-mark questions. Come up with your own 3-mark questions. They're not that difficult. And then do the same for the 5-mark questions. Come up with your own 5-mark question, make an attempt on the 5-mark questions that are actually written in the PowerPoint, and just listen and look at the information about the 5-mark questions and so on. So you don't have to listen to the whole video in one go again. Okay? All right. So that was the information that the chief examiner gave me and explanations as to why they gave the marks to those particular students. I hope you find that helpful.